Okay. Well, Danielle Barlow, lovely artist on Dartmoor, and she walks there. She's got horses there, and so she rides there as well. And she forages herbs. Well, she forages almost everything, but she forages herbs, and she makes incense from Dartmoor herbs.
Oh, lovely.
So, I mean, you can't actually, well, I mean, there are one or two other people who do it in their own places, but I know Danielle quite well. I think there's a bloke over in Kent who does it. And I'm sure there's somebody else, but I can't remember. But so you can't really do better than get your incense from her. And probably like you, because you teach making incense, don't you?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so Danielle. So, you know, we're getting more people who actually do this. And you can actually do it from our own herbs. You haven't got to use imported ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel?
It's straightforward to do, isn't it? But I have just had an incense made for me. Merlin, who runs Children of Artemis, who runs all the Witchfest and Witchfest International.
Yes.
He makes his own blends of incense to sell in their shop, and he's just made one inspired by my flower magic oracle. So
lovely.
It's beautiful and it smells divine. But there is a skill to it, isn't there? There is an art to getting the blends right and to getting the scents balanced. I mean, I chuck stuff in and think, yeah, that works that way. And it burns and that's fine. But there is an art to it, isn't there?
There is, but I mean, I think if you cook and you really like cooking, because you do, and I do when I get around to it. I don't get around to it that often, although I have just got one, and can't resist. The only trouble is it's a pain because it now means I've lost that excuse, you see. But no, there is an art, and if you cook, for me it's sort of like that, because I use, as you know, as we've talked before, I use a recipe to a degree.
Yeah, and you got to tweak it and make it your own, haven't you?
And make it for today. Because you know, doing chicken casserole last week might not be the same as doing it this week.
Depends what you've got in the cupboard or the fridge, doesn't it?
and what's in the, you know, if you've got herb garden, which we both have, you know, what's going in that.
Yeah.
So I think incense making is a bit like that. I mean, do you find it that way?
I think as well, if I'm making an incense for a specific intent, it doesn't always smell good.
No, I run with that one.
If I put the things in with the intent in mind, it doesn't always come out smelling as beautiful as it perhaps should.
Yeah, I'm a bit wary of that though, because it's sort of heading towards pink unicorns and rose petals and stuff. Because things don't, I mean, I had to do one because we occasionally we get the fox hunt around us, and to hell with that, I'm going to keep them out. And I make variations of incense and put it all the way around the border of my land, and it does work.
Yeah,
but it doesn't smell very nice.
No. Well, it's not all magic is pretty, is it? Not all magic is light and fluffy, and you know, there's got to be that balance, isn't there? I think you and I are probably both the same. We walk that line between the two of them. You have to really.
Yeah, you do.
Sometimes you have to put a foot in the dark. Sometimes you put a foot in the light.
Indeed, and if the dark says, you know, this is what we need to do, you know, and yes, they've already agreed that, you know, keeping the foxhounds and the hunt out of your garden is a good idea, then you've got to do what they ask you, and you can't say, oh well, I mean, they tend to, I don't know, we were talking about it over the weekend with my students. Other world's horrendously practical, And they sort of say, do not even start to go down the road thinking you can educate these fox hunting people.
It's a tradition that they've grown up with, isn't it? So they're set, aren't they?
And you look at the rest of them and the way they are, and the way they, I mean, you watch them ride. I used to, and you think, oh God, no. And you see them yank at their horse's mouth or something, or they're wearing spurs, and you think, oh yeah, it all follows. And then, you know, a dog gets in the wrong place, so they get the whip out and they wallop it. And it's all like part of the same thing. Yeah. And if they think you're, I mean, I've had this on Exmoor, if they think you're not part of them, they've tried to drive me off the road on the moor. And I mean, that's not a nice person.
No.
Period.
I think there's a lot of people, it's not just fox hunters, is it?
No,
there's a lot of people that are set, aren't they? We always say they're set to, they're not going to receive anything. They're set on transmit. So there's a lot of people like that, isn't there? You think, do you know what? It's not worth my effort trying to talk them round because they're not going to listen. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people like that.
And Otherworld actually say to me, they probably do to you, is like, look, will you get off that one and start working at something usful for us?
You have to decide, don't you, whether it's worth your effort or your energy or not.
Yeah, indeed. But no, the incenses I've made are not always nice.
But necessary.
Have you had to do that for people? You know, I mean, when there was something that you had to, like, they needed to say, excuse me, we can't live together kind of feeling?
I get a lot of queries actually about people asking how they can keep people off their property or get rid of people from their circle of friends, and herbs is a good way to go, isn't it? There's a hoodoo one that I like to use, the hot foot powder.
Yeah, I get that.
It's literally, I mean, I make it myself out of black pepper, paprika or chilies and salt. It's so simple, but it's so effective. Sprinkle it around your boundaries and your job done, really.
Yes,
and that's basic, simple things you have in your cupboard, but they're so powerful. No, nothing fancy, nothing expensive, no ingredients shipped from the other side of the world.
No.
Brilliant.
No. They really do. And things like, well, all the peppers really, they are so good for that kind of thing because they do pep up and they shift it, and you can feel, you sometimes even see people go, ooh, you know. And they are really, really good. But I mean, of course, salt is one of the basics, isn't it?
Traditional, isn't it? Yeah.
Isn't it? And it so works.
And I must admit, I don't buy any of the really fancy, expensive pink Himalayan salts carried down in the mountains by a monk and his lama. And pay hundreds of pounds for it. I buy supermarket table salt. Cheap, cheerful, does the job.
It does. And one thing I have found that makes a difference is it's back to this sort of thing, like I was saying with Danielle and her incenses. If I use stuff that's actually come from this land, like a salt that's come from around here. I mean, I use Malden salt quite a bit, or Cornish sea
salt. I must admit, I use Malden sea salt. Yes, we eat that.
And it's like it's from our own. Okay, it's sea salt, but that's from our own seas that wash our own coasts. And it connects into the land, and it enables her to say, okay, you give me a thread I can use. This isn't a hot pepper thread to me, which some things can be to Earth. Oh, get in there and wallop. Here you go. Have this. And that seems to be sort of quite a big thing, having worked with it.
Yeah, I am very much. I'm more so in the last few years, really, about using stuff that's connected to where I live.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things. I can't grow cinnamon in my back garden. Not that I've tried, but I'm pretty sure I can't grow cinnamon.
You might if you had a decent greenhouse or polytunnel.
I have
Possibly.
a small greenhouse. Yeah, I don't think it. Not
No,
fruit,
but I
yeah.
mean, it is a hell. And I mean, I'm sorry. How are you going to grow frankincense trees?
Well, yeah, I would love to, you know, but yeah, it's not going to happen.
It ain't going to happen. or myrrh trees, come to that. You won't get them.
No.
No.
Yeah, there are a few things that you have to kind of be a bit flexible on, aren't you? But I think there are so many things that we can make small changes with to bring it more local that are easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, this little chap, my sage bush. Well, I've got quite a few sage bushes in the garden. Most of us have probably got a sage bush because it's dead easy to grow. And there he is. And this is my sage from my garden that I've put my energy into, as we all do when we garden. And so it's sort of like, yeah, okay, we're all friends already. We'll work together, sort of thing.
There's all sorts of sages too, isn't there? I've got a purple one and a variegated one, but I've got a pineapple sage as well.
Yeah.
There's all sorts.
That's a bit difficult. Well, it's a bit delicate, so I have to be very careful of it up here, and I can only grow it if I can cover it. And at the moment, I haven't got that sorted because I've only been here about 15 months. But I hope to. But Clary Sage, of course, is so gorgeous.
Right. Yes. But there's so much, isn't there, that we can grow in the UK, just outside, just shove it in a pot and away it goes.
Yeah.
Rosemary is another good one, isn't it? That always grows very well.
Yeah.
I tried a couple of more unusual ones this year, actually. I lost a lot of my herbs last winter because it was so wet.
Yeah.
That I did lose quite a few of them.
Yeah.
So I bought some more unusual ones. I bought a rue, which I've not grown before. That seems to have done really well. I bought a woad.
Yes.
That one struggled a little bit, I must admit.
When it gets going, though, it'll take over several feet of the garden.
Yes, I was warned of that, so it is in a pot. But they're old ones, aren't they? They are traditional ones. They're ancient ones. So I wanted to try growing something that was a bit more outside of the usual thyme and rosemary and sage. And they've been all right. I have kept them in pots because we've got quite clay soil, but they seem to have done all right.
Clay soil. Okay. Get yourself 2 or 3 bags of bentonite. Bentonite. And dig over your soil and mix this in.
Okay.
And you will break up the clay.
Right.
And clay soil is actually the best soil in the whole universe for our sort of stuff anyway.
It doesn't feel like it when you're trying to dig it.
No, because so often it's lost so much, and of course we've lost so much of the mycorrhiza, so it doesn't get all the twiddles going through it. But so if you give it a helping hand, and there's another one, and it'll come to me in a minute. Whatever, bauxite.
Right.
You dig a bag of that in, depending on how many yards you've got, and it will break it up. And if you've got some nice sand, just a small amount of sand, and you will change it. And this is actually a chemical thing that happens because there are things called ions. Yeah, right.
Not the things that you take your creases out your clothes with.
No, that's an iron. These things we hear about them in, like you ought to be eating this for more, whatever it is, irons that they're talking about in the advert. But there are cations and anions, and you will increase I'm going to get this wrong now. You will increase the amount. You will increase the way the cations can work through the soil.
Right.
And so how many work into it? So it will break up and it will become really, really good. It'll never be sandy soil or
No.
kind of thing, which you don't actually want all the time, but you will be able to use it easily. And you'll find that because of the worms and everything, you spread it in, say, a fork depth, and you'll find it's gone down 3 fork depths.
Right.
And you will just be able to work the soil. Yeah. And it won't dry out in the summer.
No. Oh, that is the bonus of
which is, of course, what you get the other side of. So small chemistry and gardening lesson.
But I think that's it, isn't it? It's about understanding the soil when you're gardening. You've got to know what type of soil you've got, because not everything grows in every soil, does it? Which is why pots are always a blessing as well.
Yeah, they are. And also, if you, I used to live in a very, very alkali garden.
Right.
And I do like things like azaleas and peonies and things like that. Not a snowballs in hell. No. Unless I do what I really will not do, and that's go and buy peat.
Yeah.
And I will not do that.
That's a big no-no.
No,
we don't need it. We don't need it. There's plenty of other.
I lived perfectly well for 20 years without azaleas and peonies and all that stuff. And I couldn't grow witch hazel either, of course, for the same reason. And which was a blow on the herb side, but that's life. But up here, I'm much more acid,
right?
And so I can grow all of those. So it's like there are going to be like some herbs that are going to prefer your soil, to my soil, and so that's where one hopefully gets a bit friendly. And I can grow those. You can have some of mine, or I can grow those. You can have some of mine.
My circle of friends do that. We often turn up with little pots of stuff. Look, I've got that. In fact, the other week it was eucalyptus bark, because one of their neighbours had been chopping back a eucalyptus tree, and she'd run over there and collected all of this eucalyptus bark. So we all went home with little jars of it.
Yeah, indeed. And I was sending the students out to collect stuff, and because with the winds and that, the oak have been dropping. So I was sort of saying, please don't go and stand under one, because they tend to drop, a sort of 20-foot long, 3-foot wide branch on you.
Yes, you don't want to be underneath.
There won't be a lot of you left after that. They don't give you any warning.
Even a well-aimed acorn can hurt, can't it?
Especially when some damn squirrel has thrown it at you.
Don't upset
you. And of course, he's up there chattering away, laughing like hell. Which sort of rubs the salt in a bit, but never mind. No, I was sending them out saying, go find some oak bark, because oak bark is something I use a lot, and it's something we use in biodynamics as well.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous stuff. It really is. And one thing I have to mostly ask Fiona for, because we don't have much in the way of big pine forests here, is of course the pine gum.
Right, yes.
Which of course is so perfect again for making incense.
Brilliant.
So that's got to come around. Oh, and the other one that's happened recently is, of course, we're just going out of, well, we're probably fairly well out of with you, fly agaric time.
Right.
And so some of my students, they needed it for things that I was asking them to do, and but they couldn't all get it. And one of them lives in a city, and so it's really actually quite hard for her.
Not a lot of that growing in the city. I'm on the edge of the city.
And also it doesn't like the air there very much, so it's very hard to get it going in your garden, even if you get the spores. But one of the other students has said, I'm still passing it every day. I'll get you a Sainsbury's bag full and stick it in the post to you. And it was perfect. Yes,
that's what it's all about, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. No, I've got some of that. I've got some of that. I think we forget. I think we think about, we have to spend. I do get questions. Where do I buy all these magical herbs from? You don't. You don't buy them. Just walk outside your front door, you know, even a blade of grass has got magical energy. Use what you have.
Oh, goodness, it has. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we forget a lot of the time about the actual basics, that a dandelion growing in the crack in the pavement, gifts, they're all got so much magic, haven't they? But
Indeed.
I think we get, perhaps with the whole commercial side of thing, you get a bit, particularly if you're new maybe and you're not aware of it all, you think you've got to spend all this money and buy all these wonderfully magical ingredients labeled magical dandelions, and you know, here's a tenner.
Magical dandelions from Avalon or Merlin or somebody. Not that I'm knocking Merlin, because he's a great guy, but you know what I mean. People who use that kind of name when it's not theirs, and they just think, oh, that will sell things.
Yeah.
That'll get people excited.
Don't do it.
No, don't. And of course, the other thing is, you know, they don't necessarily know what the herb looks like if they go out for a walk and it's in the hedge.
Oh yes, you have got to identify things carefully, haven't you? Because there are some that are
like the carrot family.
Yes. Let's not pick that one, because it's very suspiciously large.
Let's say why not? Because the carrot family contains hemlock. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of hemlock from murder stories.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Oh yes, you do. You do have to be careful to identify properly, don't you? But I mean, everybody knows what a blade of grass and a dandelion looks like, I would hope.
They do. It's worth taking it further though, because there are hundreds of different sorts of grass, and there are a hell of a lot of them in this country, and each of them has a slightly different property.
Yeah.
And it's so worthwhile. And of course, you know, there you are, you're out on your walk and you're thinking, oh, there's some cocksfoot over there, oh, there's some Yorkshire fog over there, and you actually know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And each of them have got whole connections of the insects and the birds that like them and the animals that will eat them, the little ones. And so you say, oh, there's some cocksfoot over there, and you know all about around it, what's working with it. So you're really connecting to nature that way.
Yeah. I think that's something that I always encourage my students to do, is to connect with the land and the area around you. I think it's really, really important to connect, not just once.
Every day.
Yes. The first thing I do in the morning, well, Eric greets me at the bottom of the stairs first thing in the morning. So we go outside, and while he's doing his jumping about and being all excited, I take a deep breath in and connect with the energy of the day. And I think that's really, really important. And that goes for the land that you're on as well. Even as I'm on the edge of a city, and although the ocean's a 5-minute drive and the woods are a 5-minute drive, if I'm walking, it is pretty much city. There's a few parks and things, but you can still connect. There's all that layers of ancestors and spirits of the land all around. Doesn't matter where you are. And I think that's really important.
I do. And I lived in London for 25 years, which is totally different. I mean, there are fantastic parks. There really are.
Yes.
And all sorts of little parks in squares and things like that, which are gorgeous. But it is city. And it's all there. And it is underneath you. And people have forgotten it. And you can just because there's concrete there doesn't mean to say you can't connect.
No.
Thought actually does penetrate concrete. Amazing.
London's got a fascinating history though, hasn't it? That's amazing.
Yeah. And there's so much. I mean, there's a whole network of connecting lines and patterns in the city, which a friend of mine's written a book on, and I can't remember his name either. I'll try and get all these and put them up in the notes underneath, because you know, my mate, I'm old, I don't care, I can't remember. My excuse, shut up. But I will. And he always must be 35 years ago he wrote this, and the book's still there and still going well. And it's fascinating because he actually walked all of these lines all over London.
Right.
So he knows them with his feet, with his
Yeah.
body.
But there's loads of stuff underneath, isn't there? There's all sorts of tunnels and all sorts of everything under it, like a network. Yeah. Fascinating.
And most of the rivers are now underground.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
been lots and lots of rivers, and each of those has its own energy and flow. And they've got buried under the ground now because of the way we live. But you connect to them, and it's actually really worth it for them because they get remembered. They're not sort of, oh, nobody cares about me, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the main
It's a
thing.
two-way thing, isn't it? It is a two-way thing.
Yeah. And sort of like, hi, and then, oh, what? Somebody spoke to me.
I've been remembered.
Gosh, how do you speak to humans? I've forgotten this. It is so worth it. And there's actually masses of herbs actually in the parks in London. There probably are quite a bit in the parks with you.
Yes, there's all sorts of things out there. And I think when we use the term herbs as well, it kind of covers everything, doesn't it? It's not just the culinary herbs that we're used to putting in our casseroles.
Or even medicinal herbs.
Yes, it covers everything, doesn't it, really?
Do you use the old word, worts?
Worts, it's a good word, isn't it?
Isn't it? WYRTS, wort, or WIRT, wort. And so, you've got bladderwort, which we now spell with an O, but that's why it's wort.
Yeah.
And if you also sort of think bladder, it gives you a clue. Ribwort, yes. And I had occasion to try that this summer because I cracked a rib on a fall.
Ouch.
And so I plastered myself with ribwort, squished. Perhaps we won't go into how you do that here. Well, all right, well, you chew it. And then you wrap it, then you put it on another.
Use the tools that you're given.
Absolutely, and stick it to yourself with some any kind of tape will do. And within 3 days, that rib was healing. And the pain was like,
yeah. A lot of our medicines that we're used to buying in the pharmacy are based or sourced originally from herbs, aren't they? Aspirin's one, isn't it? That's
salicylic acid, which is meadowsweet, and sometimes I think willows do it too, don't they?
Yes, I think they do.
Yeah.
But I think you're probably a bit like me. When you're working magically with herbs, do you just pick whatever springs out at you?
Yeah.
Just
or I go out with
your
an
intuition.
Like you go out, you say cracked rib, help.
Yeah.
Basically. And all little rib works go, me.
Pick me.
Not quite literally, but nearly. One of them did actually get blown by the wind when I asked, which was like, really gorgeous. So yeah, I do. I just go, or even if I don't know it's a cracked rib, it's sort of like, I know I need something, point me in the right direction.
Yeah. And the right thing always turns up, doesn't it?
Yeah. The worst thing, do you have this with students too? The worst thing is getting them to believe that they didn't make that up in their heads.
Getting them to trust their intuition. I think that's everybody though, isn't it? It takes a bit of time and experience, doesn't it, to trust your own intuition? Definitely. Yeah.
And once or twice is not enough. 10 or 15 is getting, well, I probably will. 115 and 120 and 1,000 is sort of like, yeah, what else?
A logical brain likes to interfere, doesn't it? Yeah, it took me a long time to trust my intuition, and I still wobble occasionally now with things. But yeah, I think it's like anything though, isn't it? When you first learn to work with animal spirits or connect with deity, and you wonder, don't you, is that voice in my head, is that me?
Did I make that?
Am I imagining this? Yeah, it takes a while and a bit of experience, doesn't it, to trust it all?
It does. Fortunately, if you do, at least this is what I find with the students, when they do, they then get a confirmatory thing or 2 or 3 or 4 that happens right after.
Just to seal the deal.
Yeah. And there was a really funny one, went up to the Stone Circle near me, which is very nice. It was not the last group, the previous group of students. And one of it's old and it's not complete, but it's very there. And one of the tall stones has got a tiny little ledge at the bottom of it. And she'd done most of the work and basic stuff, but this stone had called her over again. So she went over to it and she looked down, and in the little ledge, little trough at the bottom, were 3 crystals. And they sort of said, pick us up, like this. And so she I can't, somebody put you there, you know, what am I doing to somebody else's spell or whatever? No, pick us up, you know. And then they started getting a little bit sort of Anglo-Saxon about it. And so anyway, she came over to me and said, I don't know what to do. They just told me this, but I shouldn't, because somebody else put them there and that sort of thing. So I said, what did the stones say?
Yeah.
And they said, pick me up. So I said this actually to her because I've known her for a while. And well, go and do as you're told then.
Don't argue with the crystals.
No, precisely. She you know, she's had 2 years with me, so you know, she does understand. So she went over and she picked them up. And of course, she got a load of stuff that they wanted to tell her about, right, not just about them, but about the circle and about the stone and about being there and about why they were there.
Yeah.
And then they said, right, we're done with you now, put us back. So, you know, all of the fears that she was thinking, oh, I've got to take somebody else's stuff and I've got to do all that. It wasn't that at all.
No.
And she was like, wow, I'm so glad I did that. And, well, you know, she said, no, I've got the lesson. I've got the lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to trust it. But I think it is something you can only learn with experience, isn't it? There isn't a shortcut to it. You've got to actually feel it and experience it over and over.
Over and over, every day.
Yeah.
And, you know, a teacher can say, you know, yeah, it really does work, but it's just somebody else's script.
Yeah.
You're not living that yet. So, you know, you're not going to know it until you actually do. And the same thing goes with herbs. You can always ask again, are you sure you need me to do that? You know, are you absolutely certain that I ought to be doing that? By which time they'll probably swear at you.
Losing their patience.
Oh, for goodness sake. Or worse. You know, just live with that. You know, it's absolutely fine. It's only the same as your friend says to you when you're being completely ridiculous. And exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, just get used to it, but don't be afraid to double check.
Yeah.
And, you know, if they sort of get grumpy about you double checking, I'm going to say, you taught me to double check. So, you know, all right.
But they are relationships, aren't they? We have relationships with the plants, the same as we do with crystals and people. It is about forming a relationship with them, isn't it? Particularly if that plant's growing in your garden, I think you form quite a strong relationship with each of them, don't you? Until the dog digs them up.
Oh.
Heucheras. He has a particular thing about heucheras. He likes to dig them up. None of the other plants, just heucheras. He obviously there's something about them that he doesn't like. He just comes wandering in with the entire plant in his mouth.
Look what I brought you, Mum. Yeah, I don't want it. I have told you about this before.
Yes, with all the soil trailing behind it.
Look, I know you're a sort of badger dog. You're a digging dog, but
it's a walled garden. They'd never get in unless they had a rope and tackle.
Indeed, they wouldn't. No, no. But I mean, the one that does me and my neighbour's head in a bit in spring is the blackbirds and the young bulbs.
Oh, okay. Helping you? Yep.
And you come out and you think, those are growing really nicely.
Yeah, they didn't want them there. They like to rearrange.
Well, I think they're actually looking to see what it is and if it is edible and things like that. And they do nip the leaves off the top. And we've both got to a stage of when they're first coming up, you know, like the crocuses or something. We actually cover them with a piece of netting. And it does work. You get a whole load of sort of rather pissed off blackbirds. Go and pull up something else, not mine.
Yeah.
There is give and take in this relationship, and you're taking too much.
Yes, there has to be. Yeah, we had pigeons do that I had a beautiful tray of succulents out on the table in the garden. They pulled every single one up and threw them on the floor. And so I replanted them, and they did that all again. They weren't eating or anything. They were just pulling them up and throwing them on the floor.
I would have started talking about pigeon breast salad at that point.
Yes, how delicious that pigeon is.
Now listen, you lot.
We only have quite a small city garden, but it's quite walled, so we don't get hedgehogs or we have had foxes. They climb the 8-foot wall. I have come out in the morning to find a fox sitting in the flower bed before now. But unfortunately, we don't get hedgehogs or anything like that. But we do get plenty of birds, which is good. Apart from
there isn't any way you can actually make a sort of little tunnel through the bottom.
We are terraced, so there's brick wall.
So it's like organised. You know, you'd have to arrange that with the neighbour and say, "I'm doing that with mine." No.
We do get lots of birds. We've got mice out there as well. There's lots of mice pootling about.
And you probably, I don't know, I mean, you do get stoats in the city.
I haven't seen any, but I guess
I don't know whether you would have there or not, but I mean, it's worth like asking your local wildlife trust, because I mean, they'll do an 8-foot wall with no problems.
Yes.
It's all a weasel. And of course, you don't see them very much, even if you've got them.
No. I could
if
see
Dachshund
and the weasel or stoat or
don't try Dachshund. Weasels are only yay big, but they're very fierce.
Yes.
Oh no! So I mean,
and you're not very fierce, are you? So yeah.
And if something bit your nose, you wouldn't like it, and she might well.
No. Well, I think that is part of when you grow things in your garden, it is the relationship again, isn't it, with the wildlife as well. You've got to make sure there's plenty for the bees and the birds, and there's berries out there and flowers for the bees and all of the insects. You've got to kind of provide for them, haven't you?
The worst problem with modern gardens is that people mow the lawn.
The gardeners are all pushing the wild
Thank God now. At least, you know, mow paths. I mow paths because it's a damn sight easier and you don't wreck everything.
Yeah.
But even in a little city garden, which I did have when I was in London, and that was paths.
Yeah.
Because, you know, guys, go out there and look up how many varieties of butterfly actually lay their eggs on long grass.
Yeah. I think the city gardens as well. Well, a lot of front gardens now. I mean, we don't really have a front garden. We've got a bit to put the bins out, basically. But they're all concrete. They're all paved.
Yeah.
And a lot of people now have to put their cars on, especially in the city, because there's nowhere to park cars.
Yeah. Except you don't have to use concrete. And you can, this is the garden designer back again. I got into this while I was working. There are very good ways of making hard standing for your car that is very hard and works and drains and will grow small plants in.
Right, yeah.
And if you do that instead, of course, you're just easing the whole water situation enormously.
Yeah, yeah.
And the flooding situation, apart from anything else. And it's actually a little nicer to look at than just concrete.
Yeah.
But people, it's not what first comes to mind in
No.
a lot of times, which is a shame because it isn't hard to do.
No.
And it won't take you any longer to do than a concrete yard.
They think practical first, don't you? Particularly.
Well, I know how to do this.
Cars are a problem, so yeah, it's thinking outside the box a bit, isn't it?
No, we did that in London to get the car off the road, and it works.
Yeah.
And it took us, and this is when I could do things, and so could my husband, and it took us 2 weeks, and we were working all day as well.
Yeah.
And then it was.
There's always options, isn't there? There is always options.
Yeah.
We've done so much damage to the planet. We ought to really think about every action, really.
We should. And we don't realise that, most people work from this more selfish point of view. It isn't just that you're helping the planet, you're actually helping yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't live without the rest of the planet.
No.
I'm sorry, Mr. Monbiot, but we won't work in hive cities. It does not happen. And
we're connected, aren't we? Everything is connected.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you have to get into what is actually, what can you do? What were you built? I find it so useful to go back and I love archaeology and history anyway, and go, well, how did you do that in the Paleolithic?
Mm.
And then you find out how, and you go, oh. And it is something you could do now.
Yes, yeah.
And it doesn't require giving up the internet and your mobile phone.
Yeah, I think we need to look at the older ways a lot, Tim. And obviously, I don't want to lose my flushing toilet or my nice.
It's much better for the whole universe if you did, but we won't.
Yes, yeah. There are one or two things that I really, really couldn't do now. But yes, there are ways of looking back at how things used to be done and learning from them, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. And for the past 20 years over I've lived in the country, out in the country, where we don't have mains drainage. We have septic tank.
Yes.
And people should go, ooh, about it. But if you actually go and look up what a septic tank is, it's a digestion system.
Yeah, basically, isn't it? I lived on a farm in my late teens, and that's what we had.
Yeah. And they say, oh, you've got to empty it all the time. No, not unless you start putting a load of plastic and garbage and wet wipes and shit down it. Well, ordinary shit's fine, but no, you don't. The last place we lived there 20 years, and we're very good. We don't put bleach down, and very occasionally do I use it, and I don't use all the sort of plastic idiocies and such like that are going to wreck it.
Yeah.
And it was never emptied, and it was the farmers where we lived, and so we'd sort of say, everything all right down there? Yes, fine, yes, keep on going. And somebody once did say to him, so, should I empty your septic tank for you? Don't you touch it, it's working.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Very much with those. And of course, they digest all of the waste that goes in, and then just clear water goes away.
Yeah.
Which goes back into the system. Very occasionally, you do need to get it checked to make sure that you haven't silted up too much. But it does take a long time for that to happen.
Yeah.
So, that's sort of like, is something that is not impossible in all sorts of places.
Yeah. It just takes a little bit of thinking outside the box, doesn't it? But we can all do it. I think it starts with us, doesn't it? I mean, obviously, we can't all suddenly build a septic tank in our garden.
Well, no, and I suggest that it's probably not necessary in a row of terraced houses. It could be a little more difficult. It will take a lot of arrangement.
But we can do little things, isn't it? Even the little tiny changes will make a difference. I stopped using the sponge scourer things, plastic.
Oh, yeah.
Like a couple of years ago, I thought, well, I'm getting through one of these a week and it's going in the bin, and I bet it's taking hundreds of years to decompose. So I've gone to washable ones now, cloth ones, chuck them in the washing machine and use them again.
Exactly.
I've stopped using the washing up gloves.
I don't.
Washing up gloves, and I'm getting through a pair of those a week and throwing them away. And it's just little things, isn't it? Really little things. But soap, I don't use the pump soaps anymore. I buy soap from Bewitched Botanicals. Actually, they make amazing handmade soap, and it smells wonderful. And there's no plastic packaging, there's no plastic bottles, but it's little things. Little tiny things, and it's all going to make a difference. And if everybody did a few little things,
it makes such a big difference. I've even got it with my vet that at the moment I'm still using a variation of Spot On for the cat for fleas.
Right. Yep.
I am working a bit against that because I'm not really quite. I know what's in them and I know what they do. And yes, it works beautifully on the fleas, but I'm looking at the rest of it. Anyway, quite regardless, at the moment we're still on that. Now, of course, it comes wrapped in some paper. I think in a little plastic bag inside a box. And I live 20 miles from my vet. This really is out in the country.
Yeah,
it's absolutely fine. We will manage everything fine. But I don't go and collect it unless I happen to be going past her, which I would be if I was going to the Stone Circle, for instance. But if I'm not, then she posts it. So they take it out of all of its packaging.
Oh, right.
Put it into a little envelope and bung it off to me.
Right.
So all I get is the envelope, which I may or may not be able to use again, but I don't get all the rest of it.
Right.
So it's like,
But packaging is a big thing, isn't it? The amount of packaging that comes on some things, you've got to wonder why.
Yeah. And there is no reason for it. I mean, I do get my milk from Somerset because I use Guernsey type 2 milk, and they're lovely, and it's organic and unpasteurized.
Nice.
And so that comes up once a month in a big box. It is a cardboard box, and because it has to be cooled, because it's going to be 12, maybe up to 24 hours before it leaves them to get to me.
Yeah.
And inside it is some stuffing and packaging, which is paper and cardboard and such like things. So it is all recyclable. So that comes up, but and the milk's in plastic bottles because that really is the best way of getting milk. Yeah, it there are sort of, you take this in can, so that's all right, but when you go to the supermarket and you bought 6 sausage rolls, which actually come out at about this long and about yay high, and they're in a box this big, with everything else, and plastic and cellophane and tinsel and God knows what. You think, why?
I did swap a proper old-fashioned milkman as well last year, so we do get the milk in.
You're lucky,
and that's all obviously that goes back, but
absolutely.
And my veg all comes from Riverford Veg Scheme, and that's, you just give the boxes back each week, and I think they reuse them up to 10 times or something like that. But
at least,
anyway. So little things.
My veg box does the same thing, but they will also because like with this cooled milk box, they actually use it because they send out other things besides just vegetables for cooling. And so I put those out, and off they go, and they get used again.
Yes, yeah, Riverford do the same because they do meat and cheeses and things.
That's right.
It's little things, isn't it, that just take a little bit of thinking about. So small changes, and it all has a ripple effect, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And your herbs are the same thing. And going back where we sort of started was like, you don't need to have, umpteen million air miles on your sage, for instance, since that's where we started, in order to have good sage.
Well, white sage is a bit of a hot potato at the moment, anyway, isn't it? Because that doesn't grow in the UK, does it? I mean, I know it's used a lot, like for cleansing and purifying over here, but it doesn't grow in the UK, so I've never used it.
No, I haven't. No. And also, it isn't the only thing in the universe that is good for cleansing. I mean, I don't know. Do you like blueberries? I don't actually like them, but lots of people do.
I don't mind them. They don't taste very much, but I don't mind them.
No, it's a bit slack, really. And blueberries are wonderful, and you've got to go and get them from there, and they're superfood and all this sort of thing.
I'd rather have a blackberry, thanks.
Well, you can actually, if you go out and you're not very far from some moorish type places where they will be. I mean, I know they're in the forest. Go and look for what we in Devon call whortleberries.
Oh, what a fabulous name.
Whortles. You're going to get me whortles today, aren't I? And now those are our version of blueberries.
Right. I've not heard that name. That's brilliant. I like that.
Yeah. Well, us talk funny things down there, don't us? So, well, where are we going today? I'm going out to the Whortles, aren't I? But no, they are, and they actually taste a lot better than blueberries.
Yeah, blueberries don't have
but you don't have to go far for them. You can't get them in December.
Yeah, this is the seasonal thing.
You can make them into very good jams and also very good cordial, which is absolutely brilliant for colds and keeping off colds and things like that. And that will last you through the winter. And you don't need much. You're not swinging it back like, a bottle of beer or something. You just need a little sip every day. And there you've got that again. And also, I mean, everybody's got this. I mean, you surely have an elder tree trying to grow its way through your garden.
Yes, they do find their way into all sorts of places, don't they?
Perfectly good in the crack in the concrete. Fine. Yeah, we can do that. But I mean, elderberries.
So
elderberry cordial is so good, and it really strengthens your immune system. It really, really does. I use it, and you can make it yourself. It's not hard.
I have a couple of friends that make it. Straightforward to do. But we're seasonal, aren't we? And that's quite a passion of mine, is to eat seasonally.
Yeah.
And I think we've got so far away from that. Shipping strawberries in December. They don't taste of anything. There's no point for a start.
I mean, they're water.
Shipped in from across the other side of the globe. And you think, no, keep it seasonal. It's going to be cheaper and tastier.
Much.
If you eat seasonally. And that goes with everything, doesn't it? Vegetables, fruit, herbs. We've lost touch with it, haven't we? I think. And I think connecting with the seasonal growing and fruits and vegetables and herbs and things is really important.
It is. And I mean, I do it. I've done it. I got out of it a bit in London, but I did before we went, and then like after we came back, well, even at the end in London I was. But your palate changes. And I mean, if somebody offered me strawberries or raspberries now, so I go, no, I don't want that. No, it's wrong.
They're not going to taste of anything.
No. But no, nice apple, yes, please.
Yes. Yeah.
And which I do, and I just find that my palate gets to a stage of now I want raspberries. And there they are.
It's the connection, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
the connection. If you're connected to the earth and the seasons, then it's all going to work in harmony, isn't it? Or it should do.
It does. Do you find you use the herbs with things like season's wheel?
Oh, like for the Sabbats?
Well,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, but also like for what you're going to collect and work with or grow or plant seeds of or
Right.
whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I find
it works, doesn't it?
yeah, and because people like come and they've got because everybody and his dog uses the season's wheel in their own way for some way.
Yeah.
And then most people have got a quite fairly sort of rigidy thing that goes along that it's Samhain, so it's this kind of thing. And if you actually sort of move out of that and sort of say, right, okay, what flowers are there at Samhain? What herbs have you got still in your garden? What vegetable have you got in your garden? What fruit have you got coming? And it moves you into a whole different space with how you feel about the season.
But seasons don't necessarily, and I say this with the Sabbats too, we call it falling off the wheel. Because the Sabbats they're dates on a calendar, aren't they? And the seasons don't necessarily line up with those dates on the calendar. I think particularly now the seasons have shifted a bit. It feels like where you don't have to put a coat on in December because it's too warm.
Exactly.
And now, what is it? Middle of November, and I've still got pelargoniums and roses and osteospermums all flowering in the garden. So you shouldn't still be flowering now.
No. And then again, I mean, this also like takes you out of the rigidity that people, I think, had got into, that Earth is changing. And you can't cut a bit off and shove her back into what you know.
No, you've got to connect with it and go with that flow, haven't you? I'm pretty sure Mother Nature is menopausal or drunk or both. The seasons aren't the same.
I'm not. I am of the opinion, I've been talking with her about this for 30 years now, because I've seen this coming and longer. And it's like, okay. I mean, it was 30 years ago that climate change actually sort of really came into my face in my back garden in London.
Yeah.
I had a eucalyptus tree, and I was sat out in June, and the wind was whipping her like it was October.
Right.
And it was like, I've never seen that before. Oh. And I mean, the whole country is covered in wind and storms at the moment. And people saying, oh, it's not natural. No, I mean, it's not normal that I knew.
Yeah.
It's perfectly natural, and it's how she is. And she's changing and moving.
Yeah.
And she's going to be different. So
absolutely.
I mean, I use seasons wheels, and I use the feast days that you call the Sabbats. I don't, because it's a relatively modern world.
It is, isn't it? It's yes, it's all from the 70s, I think, really, isn't it?
Well, older than that, because it's Gardner, and Gardner got a lot of his stuff from Italy, where it is very, very, very old, and that's part of where the words came from. But the feast days, and I still celebrate them.
Yeah.
But it's very much like, and it seems to me that there are certain deities who are still there in charge of that particular sort of area. Well, in charge, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
And so I still celebrate with them, but it's all the time. It's like, what's going on? What do you want of me this time?
Yeah.
And it won't be the same as it was last Samhain.
No, absolutely not. No.
And people are very unhappy with change. I mean, there's the old phrase of, humans and cats. Humans are even worse than cats at change.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't deal with it well, do we?
We don't want it.
No.
And it's like, go away, and it's like, tough shit, that is happening.
I mean, we teach the Sabbats because I think if you're teaching a whole kind of witchcraft education, then people need to know about the Sabbats, what they stand for, what all the origins and everything.
Yeah.
Do I celebrate them myself? Not necessarily. It gives us an excuse to do rituals, to get together and do rituals. But I am more connected with what's happening on the energy of that day or that week or that month, rather than a fixed date on the calendar. Because as you say, it's changed. I mean, winters from when I was a kid to winters when they are now are completely different. And I can't connect with a winter solstice when I'm not even wearing a coat.
No, I can, because of course they all are places where the sun goes. Now, the sun's arc and the sun's travel, and our travel around the sun, rather, which is more like it, has not changed, only very, very, very slightly. And so I celebrate the standstill, the short, the evening of the shortest day, the shortest day, because it is. Yes. Whether I've got a bikini or an overcoat on. And I celebrate that, and then I celebrate when the sun moves on the 25th of December, because it does. And that does change, because at the moment you've got the sun going in a lower and lower and lower arc every day. And then it'll change and move up. I mean, that's part of anything else. That's my new year.
Right, yes.
I mean, sod 1st of January, that was some bloody Pope,
I never have seen January. I hate January. I really hate January. I think it's depressing after all the festivities. Nothing's growing. The weather's miserable. I take January as a month of rest and recuperation, ready for the spring. That's my inner work month before preparing for the spring.
I can understand that. I don't do it. I don't do that, and I don't find that. I suppose because I work so much with what's under the ground, and it looks like it's all asleep on top, and my God, it's not.
It's busy.
Yeah, and it's like, how are we doing? And working with that. But so I do celebrate that, and I celebrate the equinoxes, of course, because that's very, very obvious. But the midpoints between midwinter and spring, which is the Imbolc time. Yes, I celebrate that, because the sun is actually, there's a change.
Yeah.
It's sort of gone up so much, and then the next day it's like, I'm up there. And that difference, I feel that energy of the sun.
That makes sense. To follow the sun, that makes absolute sense, because if you look at the Imbolc is supposed to be what the first stirrings of spring. Very often places are still under snow, and you can't see that. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is people want to see those points. But working with the sun makes absolute sense.
And so in that sense, when I work with the seasons with the students, that's what I do. And then, of course, when you're sort of saying, right, go out and find leaves, find a tree, find bark, find a twig, find a herb or something. Now, what is there? Now, okay, so we're at equinox, so this is a balanced time, and for one instant, everything is 12 hours of this and 12 hours of that. So what is that particular herb, which might be new, you haven't seen that before, 1st of February. What is that helping you? Sit with that herb, and what is that herb telling you today about Imbolc this year?
Yeah.
And then next year again. So it upsets people, some students at first, because there isn't a sort of rigid.
People like lists, don't they?
They want recipes. I'm sorry, we don't do a cookbook. No, sorry, we don't do a cookbook. But they do. I mean, one girl this last weekend, I was working with students, and she's lovely. She's absolutely amazing. And so she asked this question, guessing what the answer would be, and she sort of said, if I feel I'm supposed to leave that there instead of taking it with me when I get to such and such a point, what do I do? What shall I do? So I said, I don't know. She went, right, got it.
Yes. So you're the teacher. You're supposed to give all the answers.
I do. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
It hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And B, when it does happen, it won't happen to me. It'll happen to you.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like the girl with the crystals again. It's like you say, you want me to leave that? How do you want me to do that? Do you want me to leave it here? Are you sure you want to leave me? And when she's answered all those questions, she'll know what to do.
Yeah.
And she doesn't need me to tell her. And of course, next time it happens, she'll have the confidence of, well, I got it right last time.
Yes. Yes. Just go with it.
But it is a bit sort of shattering, oh, well, I thought we were going to be doing this. But we're not there now, are we? We've changed. And it's that sort of like, you've changed.
Yeah.
And herbs are brilliant for helping you with that, actually.
Yeah.
They
all of nature isn't it? Watching nature, paying attention to nature.
Yeah.
Is all, it helps you along, doesn't it?
It does indeed. It does indeed. And if the wind, I've got 40-mile-an-hour winds again today.
Oh, that's breezy.
I've got this lovely tall vertical grass which is out there at the moment, and it's now like this.
Horizontal. Yeah.
Well, not quite, but it's working on it, and all the trees are shaking like mad. What I find most heartbreaking for me is, I don't know whether people realize this, but these winds take hold of our little songbirds and they take them off hundreds and hundreds of miles, and then they kill the process.
Of course, yes, it would do, wouldn't it? Yeah. Everything has an effect, doesn't it? And you don't always think about the after effects of it, or no.
The really bad one we had was a couple of weeks ago, when we all emerged and were feeding the birds the next morning. There were about half as many as there had been 3 days before, and that breaks my heart.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, we forget, don't we?
There's nothing I can do about it.
No.
Well, the best thing I can do about it is I have very thick and deep, mostly or largely evergreen hedging around,
right,
and they can dive in that,
and hide.
And as long as they don't starve to death in the time or lack of water, they're probably all right. The other thing about the big hedging is that there's all sorts of little insects live in there, so the insect feeders can grab a meal, and there is edible stuff within.
Yeah.
That they non-insectors can eat. So there is there's a chance that they can make it. So I try and make enough shelter break that the wind's coming, dive in there, guys.
Yeah. Big arrow in here.
Pretty well, and stay there, and then when it's over, we'll have all the feeders filled up, come and stuff yourselves, and it's great. Sort of thing. But it's just one of those things. I can't do anything about it.
No,
it happens.
So we have waffled for quite a long time now.
It's far too long. I like waffling with you.
Yes, we could waffle all day. No, it's been brilliant, because I've actually, it's given me some real different perspectives today. So thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of things to think about from that. And like I say, never too old to learn new stuff. And it's always interesting to see how other people do things, because you always learn from it, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. And it's the same thing, because we don't work the same way.
No.
We do and we don't, put it that way.
Yeah.
And then there's, you do it that way. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It is always fascinating to learn stuff. Yeah, yes, lots of things to think about today. So thank you.
Something just went ping at me then. When you're in your January hedgehog sleep,
my bear cave, hibernating.
Your bear cave. Sorry, your bear cave. When you're in your bear cave, ask for some dreams of what's going on underneath.
Oh yes. Yes. No, see, that has given me a different perspective on January now. So yeah, I will have to have a think
There's
about
no need to stop being in a bear cave. It's nice. I do it a bit, but it's not the main thing. But ask them, while I'm in the bear cave, give me some fun dreams on what happens.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, my head's got all sorts of stuff going around in it.
We're going to shut up and have coffee or tea or something now. Ta-ra, my love. See you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much. Yes, take care and see you soon.